Right now, with Democrats firing back against the new stonewalling from the Trump White House, today directing two more former White House aides, including loyalist and person in every room, Hope Hicks, to defy congressional subpoenas. The Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler says he's not having it. And he says today the president has no lawful basis for preventing these witnesses from complying with our requests, telling reporters Hicks should show up for her hearing later this month.
Sir, do you expect Annie Donaldson and Hope Hicks to appear for these hearings?
Yeah, they do appear.
Are you satisfied with Hicks's response, sir?
That's the kind of interview that lasts as long as it takes to catch the elevator, but you got the headline. And it's not the only thing that Democrats are planning right now. Speaker Pelosi's top deputy saying the House should go ahead, this is new and something everyone's been thinking about since Wednesday, go ahead and issue a subpoena, force Bob Mueller to testify since he's made it clear he doesn't want to speak in public voluntarily. And then you get to someone who did finally come around to speaking in public. Richard Nixon's Watergate star witness, John Dean, will come back for his turn on the Hill. The very next day, the full House will vote on contempt for both Attorney General Bill Barr, who Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff dubbed today the second most dangerous man in America.
An attorney general who really is the president's defense lawyer and spokesperson, and who's quite good at it. And has the veneer of respectability to camouflage what he's doing. I think he's the second most dangerous man in the country.
Second most dangerous, the implication being the president. And then, as I mentioned before we set up Mr. Schiff's point, you also have contempt coming for Don McGahn. So there is a sort of a building in pieces, or little pieces, if you want to call it that, from the Democrats. All of this pressure, though, has Pelosi wondering whether she needs to do more, because people are saying, is this diet impeachment? Is it impeachment light? Is it time for an actual impeachment probe? 58 House Democrats and 1 Republican say it is that time. Half of the Democrats publicly on the Judiciary Committee, we've been told right here on the beat that it may be more privately. And now a new push for more than 24 joined liberal groups saying it is time. Now, one of the most high-profile Democrats to call for impeachment, freshman progressive Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says it's time to get on board.
I think that the tide is turning with the public and seeing exactly what is going on with the president advising witnesses to ignore legally binding subpoenas. I think that at this point, it is getting to become so overwhelming that we need to uphold the rule of law and the Constitution of the United States.
We are joined by New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg. She has been writing about what's going on out in the country. Democratic voters do want impeachment as the House dawdles. And journalist Jacob Weisberg, former editor-in-chief at Slate and co-founder and CEO of the podcast company Pushkin Industries. Get that right?
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you, Ari.
Nice to have you both here. Let's get into it. Is it time?
Well, I think it's been time for a while, right? But I think that one of the things that's really starting to change is that there's much more of a public groundswell than there was in the past. You know, so it used to be that Democratic leaders would say, and they've said it to me, and you hear them say it in interviews, that if you go out into the country, people aren't talking about this stuff, right? That only people in the Beltway are obsessed with Mueller and with the repercussions of the Mueller report. And that has really, really changed. You've seen it in interviews on this network. You know, the other day, Benny Thompson was on Chris Hayes' show, and he was saying that
We have that. Let's take a look at that.
I've talked to a lot of people, and to the person, everybody said, what are you all going to do about President Trump?
There's been a shift in the conversation in my community, in my district.
The report lays out 11 instances of possible obstruction of justice by the President of the United States. As I told you, this is like coming home for me.
So yeah, and I've kind of heard the same thing talking to people, right? That they say that at their town halls for the first time, you know, as much as people want to ask about prescription drug prices, they want to say, what are you doing to hold this lawless president to account? And the other problem, and I think that Nancy Pelosi is moving to address this, is that her alternative has always been, no, we're going to run these hearings and see where they lead. But until maybe today, they haven't really been leading anywhere because the White House has been so good at stonewalling them.
Ari, I really think Donald Trump is trying to provoke the Democrats into impeaching him. And Democrats naturally have the reaction, well, if he wants us to do it, it must be bad for us politically. But I think there are a couple problems with that assumption. One, it's fighting the last war. It's assuming that because impeachment backfired in the case of Bill Clinton, that it would backfire in the case of Donald Trump. I think that presumes a lot we don't know. But I think in a way the bigger problem is trivializing impeachment and politicizing it to that extent. Impeachment is a solemn thing in a democracy. It's happened twice in our history. I think there's a strong case for it with Donald Trump, but I don't think Democrats can approach it from the point of view of how is this going to play in the election? This isn't a filibuster. This isn't the next roll call vote. This is impeachment.
There's also a sort of a proceduritis that you notice in the way that this is discussed by at least some public officials. Joe Biden declares himself an arbiter of frank talk, but he's falling into it as well, using the I word to sort of suggest to voters that he's open to this while really saying, oh, well, who knows, someday this may happen. It's sort of like, aren't y'all in charge of things? So take a look at the former vice president.
If they get stonewalled and can't make any progress in any of that, then I think they have no alternative but to move to an impeachment proceeding.
If then no alternative, then they will. I mean, if you want to be the leader of the party, the nominee, let alone the president, wouldn't this be around the time where you have to tell the voters you're for this or not? And if not, maybe you make the strong case and explain why?
Right, and I think that you're seeing, candidates like Elizabeth Warren who've been on this upward trajectory that really started in some sense when she kind of came out strongly for impeachment in the immediate aftermath of the Mueller report. And full disclosure, my husband's been consulting for Elizabeth Warren. But I do think that there's this hunger, because what's happening right now is that I think the people who have politicized it the most are the people who are opposed to it, right? The Democrats who are opposed to impeachment, they're not making the argument that it's not warranted for the most part. And they're certainly not making that argument privately.
Is that politically infeasible for them?
The argument that they're making consistently is that it'll hurt us in 2020. It'll hurt us in these frontline districts.
What I'm asking you, is that politically infeasible for them then?
I think
they're caught between saying to the base, well, of course, you think there's a legitimate case for impeachment, so I'm not going to make the substantive case against it. I'm going to make this future bank shot that Jacob was criticizing.
I think that the argument that they've been making, that basically he's a criminal, he has clearly committed impeachable offenses, but we're not going to move to impeachment unless we know that we have the Republican votes to convict in the Senate. I think it makes them look like they're failing to lead, and they're sort of putting their fingers to the political wind.
It's wild. I mean, and you also have people who are kind of getting into that, a little bit of that collusion truther space, where you have some Democrats still arguing that maybe there was something very nefarious or criminal at the level of Russian conspiracy.
But that's not truther. I mean, I think that the report has over 100 pages on contacts between various Russian officials and the Trump campaign.
That Bob Mueller didn't find arose to a criminal conspiracy, which is to say...
Right, but doesn't use the framework of collusion, because there was obviously collusion.
Well, what I'm saying is you have people who point to Volume 1 and try to make it sound, what I'm arguing is worse than it is, and then they're still against impeachment. And I guess my question then would be, how bad is it if you think Volume 1 is really bad and Volume 2 is super bad? Why are you against impeachment? Hang with me. I want to bring in Congressman David Cicilline, who serves on the Judiciary Committee and is advocating impeachment hearings. I know you were running around. Thanks for getting to us. Dealer's choice on any of the above that you've been hearing that you want to weigh in on. You are in the body. We are just talking about it.
Well, I think your guest that was speaking about the solemn responsibility that we have really hits the mark. Michelle Goldberg's piece last week was superb. This is about our responsibility to uphold the rule of law, to defend the Constitution of the United States. I have been advocating for the opening of an impeachment inquiry, which is the formal process for considering whether to move forward with articles of impeachment. I think we have seen substantial evidence in the Mueller report, 10 specific instances of obstruction of justice that include asking obstructing witnesses, to create false documents, to be untruthful in their testimony, to fire the special counsel, and on and on. We now have seen the president, since the Mueller report has been released, engaging in an ongoing cover-up and trying to prevent us and the American people from seeing the full truth, and behaving as if he's above the law. No one in this country, including the President of the United States, is above the law. He's attempted to obstruct congressional investigation of these matters, and I think we need to signal to him and all those around him that we are proceeding to the next step, to open a formal inquiry, to make a determination so that we can gather the evidence appropriate to make this decision. But, this is about not just this president. This is about future presidents, about how people will look at the responsibility of honoring the Constitution, honoring our oath of office. And this is a moment where Democrats have to stand up and defend the Constitution and the rule of law in this country.
So you lay that all out. Then on the hearings themselves, are the Democrats wrong to put John Dean's, greatest hits back in the day testimony ahead of, say, Bob Mueller?
No, look, we're continuing to bring and do what we have to do to get the witnesses before the committee. The conversations with Mr. Mueller continue. We're going to bring contempt proceedings against 2 witnesses.
Let me press you on the Mueller side, and the contempt is important. We've been covering that here. But on the Mueller side, wouldn't you want to hear from Mueller before John Dean? And hasn't Mueller made clear what his position is? He told you last week publicly, and Jerry Nadler says they've been negotiating privately, but he told the world he's only coming if he's subpoenaed.
Yeah, I think there is no question that Robert Mueller made it clear to the committee and to the American people that he would prefer not to testify. But in my view, it is his duty to testify. And if he doesn't, if he's not willing to do it voluntarily, then we absolutely must subpoena him before the committee.
And I'm only pressing you. I'm only pressing you because you just said if. But he said Wednesday. I mean, tell me if I'm missing something. He said Wednesday, in lawyerly words, you'd have to subpoena me to come. When will that subpoena come if you're for it?
Well, I would advocate for that subpoena immediately. Obviously, the chairman of the chairman of the committee is continuing, and the staff of the committee, to talk to the Mueller team to see if they can reach an accommodation. It's obviously better if he comes on his own, but he has to come before the committee. That report.
Now you had me, and now you just lost me, Congressman. No, he ain't coming. He ain't coming. He ain't coming voluntarily, right?
But no. If he doesn't come voluntarily, if that's the final determination he makes, then I have every confidence the chairman of the committee will issue the subpoena that will compel his attendance and that he'll comply with that subpoena. This is a duty he owes to the country. He did extraordinary work on behalf of the American people when he conducted this investigation. He now has the responsibility to walk the American people and the committee through the Mueller report, through the decisions he made, the determinations he made, the judgments he's made. This was a report that was created because of an attack on American democracy, on our presidential elections. That was the reason this began, and it's absolutely essential that he come before the committee and explain the contents of that report. I think people want to give him every benefit of every doubt as they negotiate, but if and when he ultimately says, I will not come unless you subpoena me, then we ought to subpoena him immediately.
I'm going to leave that topic there because that's what I think he said. Jacob, final thought.
Well, we're very focused on the Mueller report, and obstruction of justice is almost certainly the first article of impeachment, but I don't think it's the only one, and we're tending to forget some of the others. Remember, high crimes and misdemeanors is fundamentally about the abuse of power. Not all crimes are impeachable offenses, and not all impeachable offenses are crimes. I think Donald Trump pointed at another impeachable offense yesterday when he called for a boycott of AT&T on Twitter, more or less to punish CNN. I think that's an abuse of presidential authority. I think there's an article of impeachment related to corruption, the ways in which he and his family have enriched themselves through office. I think these things have to be aired. I think they have to be further investigated. I'm not certain exactly what the articles of impeachment are, but it's not just the Mueller report. It's not just obstruction.
Well, and that goes, I think, to what the congressman was arguing earlier and why he's been advocating, which is, yes, those hearings then become a place to do that in a formal way, in a serious way, stipulating if it goes that direction, that there's a process that people have to abide by, not because of the politics, but because and if it's what the Congress wants to do. Or, as I've said on this show, if not, then Congressman, let us know and we'll move forward on the other stories. The Speaker seems to be holding out, maybe, possibly someday. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.